Alrighty. Let me just finish posting a link to this again on Instagram.
Okay.
Trying to get the word out. How's everyone doing? Sound out in the chat if you're doing. um, okay. Well, while we're here, do you want to introduce the topic while I'm posting on Instagram real fast?
Yeah. So we wanted to chat a little bit about world building today, from what I understand.
Yep. And by chat, I mean this is literally just going to be a chat. We don't have a presentation like we did last time. We're both in the middle of scrambling to get ready for FanX Salt Lake in a week and a half, 2 weeks. So we definitely did not have time to put together a big old presentation, but we have thoughts, and who needs a slideshow when you have thoughts? I'm glad you're in fact doing eh. I'm not sure how the double dots above the a changes the pronunciation, but I'm sure that it does.
Yeah. I mean, I know how it does for German, but I don't know
if how does it change it for German?
It's like an sound.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of depends. Sometimes it will say like the a sound too. Anyway,
nice.
It's cool. It's good.
Yeah, language is bizarre like that, isn't it? Yeah, so I figured we would chat while I'm working on this. This is going to be a print for FanX. Oh, even in French is yeah, even in French it is confusing. Though I will say, as someone who speaks English and Spanish, French is just confusing in general, specifically when it comes to pronunciation. From what I know, the grammar is not too bad, but like the pronunciation is hard. But also it's because like in Spanish, it's just pronounced how it's written, which makes sense.
Yeah, Spanish is pretty phonetic.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, so I figured while we talked, I'm going to be working on this. Is going to be a print. It's going to be a limited edition print that I'm going to be selling at FanX with no, actually let me remove this for a sec so you guys can see my screen better. With these, I got these in earlier this week. These are 3D printed little sculpts that I did of the Pescals from my comic Heaven's Hymn. So like if you want to get your hands on one of these, there's only 12 of them. So one of these super limited figurines that I will be hand painting. This is just primed, so it doesn't look super exciting. But I'll hold him up. This beautiful little guy. But yeah, so if you want to get one, come see us at FanX. We'll be there in a week and a half, 2 weeks. I think it opens 2 weeks from today. Okay, we'll be there in 2 weeks. So yeah, if you want to come see us, come say hi, and you can snag one of these guys. And then I'm going to be working on this. This is going to be a print that goes with them that'll be signed as part of the like limited edition stuff. So hopefully that's exciting. And we're going to talk about world building. Yeah. So yeah, if anybody has any questions about world building for comics, that is kind of the focus. Please sound off in the chat. Let us know. We will love to answer questions. The other thing before we jump into this, and I did not talk to you about this beforehand, Spencer, but I figured we kind of structure this in like the two sides of world building in comics. One of which being like the lore side, where it's like this is the deep lore, this is the like, the world building that we usually think when we think of world building, like applies to books, novels, video games, like all of that. And then the other one is like how you actually convey that world in comics and visually build the world that people are living in, not just like here's all the deep lore, but here's what it looks like. It's just generic medieval village, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think both would be cool to talk about. So I'm down for that.
Okay, and I think especially with comics, the thing that I see, and part of why I kind of wanted to talk about this today, is I do feel like a lot of, especially science fiction, fantasy comics, which is something that we've talked about, struggle with this side of things, and a lot of it comes down to drawing environments, and people not wanting to do that or put time into it. But like there are a lot of things that I see that I feel like have a lot of like cool lore, but it doesn't feel like they have a lot of cool lore when you read the comic. and it makes it a lot harder to access.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is it's not just environments, but it's thinking about your world in terms of this is a place where supposedly like people actually live, or like your characters actually live in and have, and that there's history to it, and that there's there's been like wars fought and all this stuff, trade and there's culture to it and all that kind of, and that often does. Yeah, and I was going to say that it often does require a bit of environment building, but it's also like thinking about like props and costumes and what kind of creatures live there and all that kind of stuff too. So it's kind of being a world builder is kind of like an all-encompassing like approach to it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and I do think sometimes people get caught up on the environments, because I know environments can be scary, and backgrounds can be hard, and they take a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I also know that there's a lot of merit to like the other sides of things, right? There are things that I've seen where it's like nothing in the environment's like super interesting about the world, but the way that people dress, the way that they talk, the props that they have, all of those things adds a lot more to it. We got a question. I don't know how to frame this question, but what is the best way to show off world building without overwhelming the reader too much with new info? Oh, this is a great question. I love this, but I realized I should probably post in a Discord channel to see if anybody else is going to show up really fast. Do you want to start on this one while I do that really fast?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different approaches. What I think is nice about the medium of comics over some of the other things is that you have the benefit of being able to show what things are, right? So like in a novel, me and my wife we just started reading, or I started reading the Stormlight Archives for like the first time. She's been reading it to me.
Yes.
And yeah, thanks. Marcus has been trying to get me to read it for years, and I'm like, it's so long, it's thousands of pages. But anyway, so she's committed to it, and so we had a road trip, and so she started reading it to me on that. And there's a lot of stuff in there that is pretty tricky, I think. Oh, Olivia's on the. Is that Olivia?
Oh, hi, Liv. I'm assuming it's you, the Olivia that we know. If you're not the Olivia that we know, I guess let us know. Yeah, we love the Stormlight Archive.
Yeah. So okay, awesome. Yeah, it is Olivia. She's one of our friends from school. So well, what I was going to say about Stormlight is there's a lot of stuff in there, and that's like really tricky to visualize. And so there's a lot of like Brandon Sanderson is very good at presenting information in a way that's exciting, but he has to do a lot of tricks, I'd say, to like get you to care about what's going on in the world. He doesn't start off with like here's the history of Roshar or whatever. He starts it off with this is this character, and they're going through this like they've got this specific thing that they're trying to accomplish, and then they're seeing the world through that character's eyes. With comics, you have the benefit of being able to just show people stuff that looks cool. So if you've got a really weird and creative world, you can first think of it visually, and I would say that comics is primarily a visual medium, and so you probably want to start thinking about first of all, what makes my world visually distinct from other things that I've seen. And of course, if you're working in something like fantasy or sci-fi, I don't know if this person who asked the question is doing that, but like there are like cliches. And you can there's what people have to think about is cliche breeds familiarity. So there's certain cliches that you want to stick with so that people can get what's going on. But then how do you find a way to move beyond the cliche? That's what I'd say, like the first thing. But then the other thing that I would say is just focus on what the reader has to know for the moment of the story that you're telling, and try to find a way that doesn't involve expositing in like a really dry way. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this, Marcus?
Well, I kind of want to add to what you just said with the focus on what people need to know right now. I think sometimes we get so excited about the worlds that we have. We're like, look at all this cool lore, that we as creators, because that's what we are excited about in the world, we forget that that's not necessarily what your reader is going to be excited about in your world. It might be eventually, but usually from the get-go, I'm not sold on a world if they're like, look, there's this lore. Occasionally, if it's like a very specific kind of thing, like I'm always a sucker for sky worlds, so floating islands. If there are airships or speculative evolution, like those things are always going to be super appealing to me. Surprising, and absolutely no one who's read Heaven's Hymn. Those are my favorite things. So like there are some like aspects to a world, I'd say, that are inherently interesting and add a lot. But we forget the power of mystery. There's so much value in presenting your audience with a question, especially when we're talking about, sharing lore and sharing world building. So like a wonderful example of this and this applies both to the movie and the comic, is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Because Miyazaki just kind of drops us in this world, and there's a bit more lore dumping in the movie than we get in the comics because it has to go a lot quicker. But if you read the manga, you're kind of just there, and then there are these massive bugs, and then there's this, and then there's a very brief like, this is what's happened, but then you're like, okay, so this happened, how did we get here? And so by showing you things, it's making you ask questions, because it's showing you things that are not that kind of break that cliche. And so we're operating within this science fiction fantasy cliche, and we're like, oh, there's this. But by showing things like, this is different, this is new, this is specific, we're confronted with that. We have to ask questions. And I use specific, not unique, because I do think we get caught up with the idea of unique as well, where it's like it has to be unlike anything else. But sometimes all it has to be is specific. I think specificity, which again is not the same as depth or as having a vast quantity of lore, but specificity in world building, it goes a long way for creating interesting and engaging worlds. So yeah, let your audience have questions. Mystery novels are one of the best novels because they operate fundamentally on question of, who done it. And if you don't let your audience ask, why is it like this? What's going on? Then they're going to lose interest. To share a really brief anecdote really quickly, I'm a big fan of the new Dune movies that have come out. I think they're really phenomenal storytelling and world building and such. But part of why it works is it gives us time to just sit and be in the world. It does not answer hardly any of the questions, but which for some people is a big turnoff. They're like, this is confusing, I don't get it, I'm turning away. But if you can have a question and imply that there is an answer, so that it's not just like, why is it like this? And it's like, but if you're like, there's a reason this thing is here, which again is part of the balance that you have to get to, and is not, it's a lot easier said than done. But if you have a question and imply that there is an answer, then it makes it a lot more interesting. So I remember after I saw the first movie, I hadn't read any of the books. I went with a friend who was a huge fan, and we sat in her car for like 2 hours afterwards. And I was just like, okay, so what do the sandworms eat? And she was like, there's an answer for this. Like, what about the ecology of Arrakis? And she's like, there are answers for all of this, because on like the first level, there's like, you can tell that that's thought through, even though it's not explicitly stated. And that's that rant over for a little bit.
Hang on, Marcus, I'm going to interrupt you because Olivia's saying some good things. She says, this is to the cliche point where she says, I remember Sam saying something about cliches. Sam was our professor in college, saying something about cliches where it's a timeless theme that's been executed the same way, so it's become tired. And I think that's very true. Like, the reason why cliches are even cliches is because it actually works. And so there's something to that. And don't be afraid of like experimenting with them. And I think like the goal is to learn from them. Like, why is that working? And then can you find something that like works in a similar kind of way? And then Olivia also said, I think that's why people love Miyazaki movies so much. They show how characters use these characters' extraordinary systems in an ordinary way. And I think that's really true of that kind of filmmaking. And I think of a lot of like really good like fantasy stories. It's like that's just the world where the characters live, you know. And so if you drop a person in this world where this character is just like living and existing, and then showing how they exist and live, then like people are going to be invested, because it's just like, oh yeah, this is just how that is, and it immediately becomes more interesting. Immediately makes it feel more alive. So
yeah. Well, and I think also adding to cliches, I think a lot of the things that are the most interesting when it comes to like breaking out of cliches aren't the things that reject the like anything that could be perceived as cliche, but they're the things that reject some very specific things. Again, it's the specificity. It's saying, I'm going to step away from this cliche while leaning into it. And this is like something that I've done with Heaven's Hymn, which if you haven't read, we are just started uploading volume 2 today. The first episode of volume 2 went up, so you should go check it out on WebTube. I will shamelessly plug also, because this is my live stream. But like there are plenty of like cliches that are in there, right? We have like fantasy rogue archetype. We have the grizzled grumpy man and adopted child like archetype and cliche in storytelling. And so there are a lot of things that aren't that out the box as far as like a fantasy setting goes, right? We have inquisitors who are hunting magic users. Like that's an idea that's been around for a long time. But there are a few things that I've chosen to make, again, not even like this is a counter to that cliche, but just very specific, like the world, the ecology that people are in, the religious beliefs of certain groups, which we're going to get to as the story progresses. We have not gotten into that a ton. And so a lot of what makes it something feel cliche isn't the fact that it fits in a cliche, but is the fact that it is nothing more than just a cliche. So yeah, going back to the idea of specificity, develop it, let it become more than just enemies to lovers, etc.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was just saying, we got another comment about the etymology of the word cliche is really interesting, because it comes from the fact that typing makes a monotonous clicking noise. Really?
That's so interesting.
That's fascinating. I love when people share fun facts. Anyway, you were saying, Spencer.
I was just going to ask you. Actually, we just have another question, so we can just move on, I guess.
You can ask me really quick, and we can get to that question.
I don't remember exactly what it is. If it comes up again, I'll ask it. But
okay.
So Jonathan asks, another question is more of a cultural world building one. How would you handle food in your story's culture, since food is such a big part of most cultures?
I mean, I'll share a really quick one. The fact that you're asking this question in the first place probably means you're leaps above where most other, world builders are going to be. Because like that is something that we don't talk about as much. And I think I just want to highlight, like, part of what makes world building good, again, harping on specificity, is when the mundane is thought through, right? When the world building isn't just, and there are dragons and this order of knights and all of these things, but this is the food that people eat, then that's fascinating. Going back to Stormlight, like Spencer was mentioning earlier, that's one of the things that all like stood out to me from the get-go is like the food that they reference is never just like, and I had a piece of chicken and I had this and I had this. Like there are specific dishes that pull from different like cultural references from around the world that aren't just this is medieval gruel and meat and bread. And that's part of what makes the world so fascinating.
Yeah, I think immediately what I was going to say is, and this is probably what we would have gotten to anyway at any point. Most worlds, and this is just true of art in general, everything that you create has to be taken from other things, right? So when you're creature designing, and Marcus knows this, like you pull from real world creatures and you basically grab different parts of real world creatures and you try to mix them together to try to find an interesting like combination of things. It's the same thing with world building. So if you're like, well, actually, I will say one thing too. It's really, really good to think about this kind of stuff, like to get that in depth with world building. The other question, though, that I would ask myself if I'm thinking to the extent to the specificity of food is food important for the story I'm trying to tell? Because the reason for that is because you can spend forever building a world and never get around to actually making your comic. And because comics just take a lot of time. So if food is important, and I think food might be important, you might have scenes with food in it, right? I would design though from a story first, saying like, oh, I'm going like in this scene, the characters are going into a bar, and like what kind of food are they going to have? How do I make that unique? Rather than saying, oh, I've got this really big world and I just keep adding different parts to it, because you can spend your entire life researching your world. And if that's all you want to do, that's great. Like, I'm not going to say don't do that. It's just a world. I think it was maybe Jake Parker who said this, but it's like, there's like the world building disease where it's like you just spend your entire life building your world and you never get around to telling the stories in your world. So that's the one bit of caution just with getting too specific. But then the other thing I was going to say is like pull from different food that you've had, and go and like eat at different restaurants. Like go try Indian food or like Ethiopian food, and go eat Japanese ramen or like sushi or something like that, and just see like what different cultures do, and then think about like, okay, if my world has this type of like these types of vegetables, these type of this type of like climate, where are places in the world that have that type of climate, and what's the kind of food that they eat, because then you'll learn a lot through studying real world culture.
Well, and kind of building off of that too, like if I agree 100%, like go story first, basically with everything, right? Like that's just good advice, because if you get bogged down too much with, this is the world, and then you never make the story, it's never going to go anywhere. Or you'll end up with so much world that you don't actually know how to tell a story in that world, which makes it hard. And so, but if you are like coming to the point where it's like, I need food, but I don't know what food to have, the questions to ask are just like, what is the environment of the world and what are real world parallels? And if you have something like what I have with Heaven's Hymn, where everyone's living on islands in the sky, you have to take into consideration the limitations that come with that. It's a similar idea of like creative constraints, but like being aware that like these people probably won't be eating beef, because you have to have huge pastures. Like cows require a ton of grass and a lot of space. And if you're on an island in the sky with limited water, limited space, that's probably not going to be something that you're going to invest in. Quick side tangent, these little buggy guys that I'm drawing here actually originated for Heaven's Hymn from this same question of like, well, what are people eating and how are they getting their food? And I figured it would make sense that if like, well, if the islands aren't as resource rich, maybe they can get food from the sky. I was like, well, what lives in the sky? I was like, maybe there's like a bugfish, and that's kind of, and here's the bugfish, And so I think it's always really good to entertain questions like that, because they can add a lot of flavor, as long as you're not getting flavor. This is food. As long as you're not getting lost in the weeds too much, because again, there's a very real danger of too much lore.
Did that answer your question, John? Well, we can wait for him. We can. Okay, thank you.
Sweet.
You said he did.
Going into kind of some of the things that I was wanting to talk about, not that this is exactly what I've been wanting to talk, but like some of the thoughts that I had beforehand, with world building, a lot of what we've been talking about has kind of been in the pre-production stage, right? Like this is ideation, maybe a little bit into like the viz dev stage of making a comic. before you get to actually like producing it. And like I do want to highlight how important that is, but I do also think that it's important to also connect it to the end goal, to where you're going and when you're actually producing the comic. But before you can get to that, you have to do viz dev. I do think a lot of places where world building suffers is because comic artists don't do viz dev, and don't take the time to design before they create. I remember one of my favorite web comics is Stand Still, Stay Silent by Mina Sunderberg. I actually have some of her printed books here. They're gorgeous. They are not cheap, but they're beautiful. And part of what stands out about her work, if the page reads well, is like how unique everything feels because everything was designed. She took the time before she started production to design it and to make sure she had a solid idea. When this is not to say that you need to like design every single element that shows up every single time, because if there's a barrel in the background, you don't have to like sit too specifically with like that barrel. Again, story first. But one of the things that's been the most helpful for me with Heaven's Hymn was I took a viz dev class from Sam, the professor that Olivia was mentioning in the comics. And for the last little bit of the class, I got to do viz dev specifically for Heaven's Hymn. And taking that time was super valuable because it made me realize the questions that I hadn't asked or answered yet in a lot of ways. So I would recommend also, where you're world building for a visual format, do viz dev. Take time to draw anything that you think could be in the world, right? And one of the things Spencer and I have said a lot about comics too is like, if you want to learn how to draw anything, make a comic, because you're going to have to draw everything. And that's true. Like, as you get started, if you're also feeling like you're not there yet, start with a little short story, and that can help you figure out like questions that you need to answer as far as like from a design standpoint, right? You'll be sitting there, it's like, well, this takes place in a village. Well, what did the buildings look like? What kind of architecture do I want to reference? And if you hadn't thought about that yet, then now you have an opportunity to.
I've got a question for you, Marcus.
Yeah.
So when you're designing things for your world, what do you do for that? Like, is it time in your sketchbook, or is it like I sit down and I make a whole finished piece, or like how do you develop new things? Because obviously you had a lot of design going into Heaven's Hymn because they were OCs and things that you've been drawing since you were like
a decade worth of design. Yeah.
But like when you have something new, right? That you're designing, what do you do? Like, what's your process going through that?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is, right? Because some designs are made specifically to solve a problem, right? So like I mentioned with the pestle, it was like, this is a gap in the world. Let me fill this and figure this out. So there's kind of two origins, I guess, from design, from like a ideation standpoint. And then that's going to answer like the mechanics of like actually doing the design. But for me, the origins, it's either there's a problem that needs solving that I must have a design for, or I am doodling in the genre and I have something that I really like, or I had this idea for something that would look interesting and I want to explore that, and then I hit it and I'm like, I want to put that in my comic. But most of it happens in my sketchbook, predominantly. I don't usually do finished things unless there's something else that it's for, like a class, or I'm making a video about the creature design. So if ever I have a nice finished creature design sheet, it's probably because I was making a video about that creature in Heaven's Hymn and I wanted to like have something nice to show about it. So a lot of it is just sketchbook work and ideation. Now, if I were starting like from ground zero on a new project, I would definitely do like finished things so I can have color reference and everything else. With Heaven's Hymn, where I have such like an established and developed style and format and like story that I'm telling. I don't feel like I need that as much, because if I know how to translate a sketch into the world of Heaven's Hymn because I've been drawing so much of it for so long. But like for other projects that I've thought up and will do in the future, I'll definitely have like a whole viz dev phase that has more finished, like portfolio worthy things in it.
Yeah.
If I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. No, it does. I just think it's interesting to hear what other people's processes are.
Yeah. What about you? Because I mean, you've got a fair bit of
I think world
building and design.
I come from animation, right? And like things have to be a lot more solid, I think, than maybe an illustration with like before. It's weird because there's not like as much of a polished final deliverable, but like you have to get further in your sketches, I think, in some ways. And so I actually feel like I've had to pull myself back a lot when I'm working on comics and stuff, and just do and say, okay, it's fine. Like, let me just make the thing now, let me move on from the design stage, just because design's so fun for me. So yeah, I need to be keeping a better sketchbook. I haven't been doing as well at that recently, but I think it's been because I've been working on getting specific projects done. So
yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. I also need to be spending more time in my sketchbook. But yeah, if anybody's looking for like world building stuff, spend time in your sketchbook, draw things. Draw a lot. That's going to be very helpful, and think about it a lot. That's maybe the other like general piece of advice is just take time to think about your world. Right, like take time to be in it in your mind, and such. And yeah, that would be kind of a thought there. So going forward, so Olivia has a question, and then again, if anyone has any other questions going in, I think we just keep ranting about things, and we can talk about the process of getting from the ideation to the execution more specifically, and give more examples. But so Olivia asked, do you guys have any new projects in the works that we could talk about? I can talk about a little bit of like my paid job currently, which is I design action figures. So if you just want to hop onto my Instagram, you can see the one that has been revealed. I have a bunch that I can't talk about because it's under an NDA, but it's super fun and super cool. So if you want to see that, beyond that, I'm also just continuing on Heaven's Hymn. I've finished the first chapter of Volume 2. The first episode of that went up today on Webtoon. I'm currently finishing the outline and getting started on the scripts for the next few chapters. And I've been learning how to model digitally. And I made this guy, which we showed at the beginning of the stream. But this is a resin 3D print of the Pescals that I'm drawing right here, that I'm going to be selling at Fanix. So if you want to get one, come see me at Fanix. Anyway, that's what I've been up to.
I can share this panel that I've been working on because I'm
let me make you big.
I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, you're bigger now.
Yeah, those are some frogs.
Uh-oh, there we go.
See that? So I'm working on a comic right now that I'm going to print for Fanix too. And it's a short story for a larger form thing. But yes, there are
that someday he'll make.
That someday I'll make. But it's not a short story. It's like 34 pages. So it's this.
Yeah, it's a pretty chunky floppy.
Yeah. There's evil frogs in it. So if you guys want to see that, then you can come check out my book too.
He's also been posting on Instagram, so you can read through what he has
true.
over there too.
I've been posting on
Instagram. John asked, y'all have said what gives you inspiration, because the works were done well, but are there any stories that inspired you to do better because the story was poor at world building? Ooh, oh, that's such a great question. Do you want to start on this? I feel like I went first in the last few.
I'm trying to think of bad world building. Why don't you go first? Because I don't have anything.
Okay.
Like right
now. I don't mean to be rude, but most of what I see under the fantasy section on Webtoon, I think fits that.
Yeah.
And I don't blame the artists for like bad craft. I know a lot of Webtoons have super ridiculous schedules that people have to do, so they just zip through it. But like what it is almost everything I encounter there feels like it's the same world, even if there are different things. Just as like, oh, there's a monster. It's like every monster, like any monster that you could see it in D&D, you could see it in, any JRPG, you could see it in any other fantasy webtoon or any isekai, anything. Like it's just there, right? So
yeah, I feel like there's a lot of anime that has like amazing world building, like some of the best world building in the world, and then there's so much anime that's just like the most boring, generic fantasy that you've ever seen.
Ooh, okay, wait. I have one, and this isn't just world building. This is just overall story that I found, and it like I have never had a story that a show that the more episodes I watched, the more I felt rage in my heart and aggressively like despised it.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, I really don't like solo leveling. Yeah. Nothing about the world is interesting. Nothing seems like there are ideas that are posed at the beginning that I'm like, that's interesting. Where it's like, okay, monsters coming through, see how society changes. But instead of addressing any of the things from the premise that could have been interesting, we spend all the time with the least interesting person, who is just a bad person, who the whole plot is he fights things, gets stronger. And like it's not even like a Naruto, he fights things, gets stronger, because he doesn't have to work for it. I know people say like, oh, he has to work really hard. It's like he doesn't though. He dies and then gets a superpower. And then he goes and he's like, he just has to be angry. That's it. That's all he has to be in order to kill things. And I'm just like, this is not fun. This is not interesting. The designs, I was like, meh. The creatures, like, again, this feels like it could come from any fantasy, anything. It's not specific. It's vague. It's boring. And so I saw that and I said, I want to make my story better. Not because my story isn't good. Or, well, no, it was made. I feel really good about my story because it's good.
Yeah. I gotta say, I think I'm gonna go a little older than you, but it's the same kind of thing. Sword Art Online is an atrocious piece of anime. And
we got some really hot takes over here. By that I mean I don't.
What?
Oh, I was like,
well, I had a friend
like, I don't think they're actually that hot.
Yeah, well, I had a friend who made me sit through all 4 seasons of it. So, but the thing is, the problem that I have with it, with this, and I think Solo Leveling struggles with kind of a similar thing, is they have this very interesting premise that they don't actually, like, they don't utilize the full implication of that premise, right? So like in Sword Art Online, they get trapped in a video game, and then most of the show is about him going around and girls falling in love with him. And I'm like, that wouldn't be how that went down. Like if people were trapped in a video game, would they like try to be like, oh, this is like how we're supposed to live now, and like how do we figure out how to like create a society? Like that's a much more interesting story, you know? And they never go there.
Yeah.
Because they want that power fantasy.
Yeah. Have you seen Log Horizon?
No, but I've heard about Log Horizon. I've kind of sworn off any game type anime.
Yeah.
Like, I can't sit through it. But
that's so fair. This is the only one that I ever recommend to anybody because it has all of the things that made the initial Sword Art Online premise interesting, of like trapped in a video game, how do people adapt, all of these things. But instead of focusing on bland male protagonist is the sexiest man, we focus on like the geopolitical situation. There's a whole like arc about NPC rights and whether they count as real people or not. as they're like, as because like the players are there, but the non-player characters are also like gaining sentience at the same time. But unlike the players, they don't like regenerate when they die. It's like there's a lot of implications there, and like people address it, and like we have protagonists going on stopping players from just like committing actual murder because they don't believe these are people, and it's fascinating. And we also like they discuss like trade and like a lot of other things. I'm not going to say it's a perfect anime. I don't know if it would be in like my top 5, but it is the best video game adjacent anything that isn't just a video game that I've seen.
Yeah.
So if you like the idea of Sword Art Online, you'd like the actual show of Log Horizon.
I'll try it out.
I think the principle that we're kind of like stumbling around here is just like, if you're going to set up a premise, make sure that your audience can't think of a better story for that premise. You can.
Yeah.
And how do you know? Like maybe talk to people about it. Like see what pitch things to people if you've got an idea, if you've got a world that you're developing, and if people lean in and they say, "Oh, that's really interesting. What if this happened? What if this happened?" I mean, you don't have to take everyone's ideas, but like see what's actually interesting about your concept. And then try to like. I remember I read a webtoon once. Also, if anyone's favorite anime is Solo Leveling and Sword Art Online, I apologize, but
you are okay to enjoy media.
Yeah,
just as it's okay to not like it.
Right, and the thing is, like, neither. I mean, these are both very successful animes. So, like,
they both have more reach than we probably ever will with any story that we tell.
Yeah, but we just have personal pet peeves about certain things. But I remember reading a webtoon once where, and if anyone remembers what this webtoon is, and if they like it, that's fine. The concept was this girl could she could like fast forward through time. Like she had weird time powers where she could fast forward through time. And so she like spent most of her life like just fast forwarding through like the really boring parts of life. But then there's this one time when she's in school or whatever, and she fast forwards through school, like through her walk home, and she ends up waking up halfway through, and her like best friend is next to her, and it's got like a knife in her gut, and she's like holding the knife, but she knows she didn't do it. And so she gets like, she's going to like be blamed for it or whatever. And I was like, wow, that is like the most amazing like first episode I've ever read. And the next episode was then about how her friend was trying to kill her because of time powers or whatever. And then it ended up devolving into a story where she was going to go around assassinating other people with time powers. And I was like, no, you just ruined your premise. Because what I was interested in reading that first episode was, this is going to be a murder mystery story about who killed this guy, and she doesn't know, but she's stuck in the middle of it, and she's going to have to be a fugitive or whatever, in kind of this more grounded setting. And then it immediately went to sort of like a battle royale sort of situation, kind of like a Hunger Games thing. And that's fine. Like if someone enjoys that, I personally don't enjoy that genre. And I was disappointed because the story had set up something else, you know? So I think that's something that you have to be in. This is just a general storytelling, right? Like this isn't necessarily world building, but I think world building is a part of it. Like if you have this world though, where it's like, the story I want to tell is, you know, battle royale with time travelers. Don't start with a murder mystery plot, you know, like introduce to your audience what the story is going to be and what it's going to be about, so that they're not confused. Because then you don't have people like me where it's like, I'm much more interested in like a detective story than I am in like battle royale Hunger Games. But I know that other people would be interested in that, right? But they're not going to find your story because you started with this other thing. So, and that's not to say like you can't have stories with multiple like genres in it. But it's just be very clear with what story you're trying to tell.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to kind of what you said, you have to be story first with a lot of it. And if the story is bad, the good world building rarely saves a bad story. That said, I have seen good stories save bad world building, but they will always make each other better. A good story will make the world building better, and good world building will make a good story better. So it's not a focus on this one over this one. You do both. because if you don't, you're going to be making it worse for it.
Right. Well, and the stuff that is really the greatest, like the things that like actually make big cultural differences, usually have both. You know, like things that are truly unique and special, usually have really great story with really good world building. Olivia's asking, I'm curious if you guys have any reference / ideas for how to weave world building into the panels.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of like the second part that we talked about at the beginning, right? Where we're going to discuss like the previs kind of stuff and like the storytelling and writing side, and then the execution. And this is one that I've thought a lot about. So I don't know if you want to have anything you want to say off the bat, or if you should.
You can go.
Okay. And I will try not to talk too much, but also that's what this stream is. So the idea of like weaving the world building into the panels, I think, is a really fascinating thing to discuss, and is something that I think is, again, often neglected within specifically modern comics and especially in web comics. The first like thought that I'd have is anytime you have a detail in the background, I would ask myself, like, how can I make this more interesting, right? So if you have like this medieval village and you have this interesting world, why make every building the same like kind of style when you could add specifics, right? It doesn't have to be like, so none of my buildings look like traditional medieval buildings, but like, well, okay, maybe the church, instead of looking like a Catholic church, is a different shape, or maybe you pull on different things for that. And adding, again, just that one little specificity in the background can do a lot. And the other thing is to make sure that the world, when you do have environment shots, isn't empty. It's a lot of work to do backgrounds. Like, they take a lot of time, and you definitely, like, there's a give and take. You do not need to go absolutely hog in every single background that you have. You don't need to be super like detailed with everything. You're going to overwhelm your reader. Kind of like what we talked about last week, where it's like, if you have too many things, it's going to take so long to read that you'll interrupt the pacing. It'll be problematic. But when you do have a background, make sure there's life in it, or a deliberate absence of life, right? If that's part of the world. But make sure you have clues to the world in there. So this is something I've tried to do a lot with Heaven's Hymn, which, again, I bring up because it's my experience. Not that it is the pinnacle of world building in comics. There are things that are better. But if you can have little things that just feel lived in, popping in, having an animal, right? Like, most of, again, unless this is a setting that doesn't have animals in it, put a pigeon in the park. Like, it doesn't have to be that revolutionary, but it's similar, just like thinking through, like, well, what are people eating here? It's like, if nobody is out on the street, why? Who is here when nobody's out? Like, right? Is it night and nobody's out? Or if there's a crowd, who are they? What are they doing? Where are they going? How are these people interacting? What is this space used for, right? In the background. And so asking some simple questions, which, again, you don't have to go and it's like, I'm going to design this whole market and all of these things that my audience is never going to see, and stick them in there. That's not what I'm advocating. But what I am saying is, like, put life into the world, right? It doesn't have to be just a background, or just bare bones, or just enough to tell you, hey, it's kind of medieval, or it's kind of futuristic. And this is something where I advocate for creature design, or just putting creatures into things. And this is a specific thing that I've done with Heaven's Hymn, where the ecology and the creature design is a big part of the world and a big part of the story theme, and like what makes it interesting. And so when I have a shot, I'm like, well, I'm going to put a little guy here, because what animals are going to be around in the city? Well, we'll have like pigeons. People have chickens that are probably running around. People, what eats those things? They're probably birds. And so by including those things every once in a while, it helps to inform the reader that there's a lot more in this world than just what we're seeing, but also without like dragging attention away from the plot and from the characters to say, also, by the way, look at this thing. And so that's kind of what I'll say for that right now. Yeah, sky elves are a great example. Someone just say, yeah, sky elves are a fun example of this. Yeah, having little guys floating around. You're like, oh, look, cool. And yeah, and this is one of the things I love about Stormlight Archive is Brandon Sanderson mentions the flora and fauna of the world because it's part of what makes it so interesting. And it's not a, and then this thing that looked like this and did this. It was a, and the troll walked away, and you're like, well, what is that? It's like, it's a thing. It's a crab thing. And it's done well. And I, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to take, I think everything you said is really great. I'm going to take just like a little bit of a different approach and just talk about paneling specifically. So I think with environments and world building, you have to, there's something to be aware of with your effect that's going to have on the panels. Panels with more stuff get rid slower, right? So I think that whatever story you're pacing through, you want to think about the relative speed through which something needs to be read. So if it's going to be an action scene, it might not be the best thing to show off really, really beautiful, intricate environments, unless that's kind of the purpose of it. So like, but then if you have like a slower scene where a character's just walking through, a city to get something done, then have stuff in the background. One of the things that I love about, or like one panel that I really love in Heaven's Hymn, like your first volume, Marcus, that you did, is there's the scene where Call's running away and he just passes by this like pterodactyl looking thing that's like pulling a cart. And that's just something that's in the background. And you probably have a backstory of it. It's kind of what I call like the Star Wars approach to world building, where it's just like every droid in the cantina had like a backstory, like George Lucas had written something for them. And that might be
of course
a bit, right. But that might be a bit too much. But like Star Wars has really good world building because there's a story to everything. He knows who those characters are, even though you only see them for a couple of frames, So that kind of love, and you don't have to go crazy with it. Just be like, oh yeah, this is like the grumpy farmer and he's on his way to work and he's got his pterodactyl thing that's been acting up all day or whatever. And then he's interrupted by my main character is running past or whatever. Sorry.
Yeah, I can show the page over here. I'm popping it in. Oh, it's so big. I could have just shared the other screen, but instead I'm doing this. I'm pretty sure this is the one you're talking about. This is in chapter 1.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have Call running past this guy in his road. Yeah, and so and there's a lot of things, in this little one shot that I think we're informed about. But also, if you notice, it's not like there's a ton of stuff going on here either. It's a few specific details. Again, going back to specificity, I prioritize specificity over quantity always. And you look at like there's,
Oh, the other thing that I was going to say too is this is the introduction of this scene, and so you can get away with more details at the beginning of the scene because the audience isn't invested yet in the action.
Yeah,
like they're being introduced to it, so you're taking a whole page. This is what's going on. This guy's being chased, and this is the market. This is the environment that he's being chased in. And then you have later pages, which a lot of that stuff kind of drops out. And I think that's really a really smart way to approach it, because then when the action gets a little more intense, you can lose yourself in the action. So that's kind of something about.
Yeah. The other thing too, I think talking about like paneling specifically for world building is the value of aspect to aspect transitions and panels. Mike Mignola is is a genius with this, because he's able to get a lot of specific details shown without overwhelming us, because it's just like we have there's one from, I think it's the second one from Strange Places, when Hellboy is drinking with the dead like sailors and he's on like this derelict ship, and we see him there, and like we have like some shots, but we take a time to zoom in on the bottle of rum and on the skulls of the people and like details of these figures in here, and none of them are super detailed, none of them are super like intricate or anything, but having those little shots, it adds a lot more richness to the world and to the scene without having to be like, all right, audience, boom, here's this huge detail shot. Now you have to unpack this and figure out what's important and what's adding and what's just there, etc. To like establish like where we are in space. And so I think that does a lot. So Olivia mentioned something with with the frames and layout specifically, which Atelier does a lot, where frame itself is telling you more about the story and the world. That's a fascinating thing to jump into. I haven't read Witch Hat Atelier yet. It's on my it's very high up on my TBR list. I see I have a ton of the art like saved on Pinterest and stuff. And like I see a bunch of stuff about it, and so I know about it, but I haven't read it.
It's really gorgeous.
So yeah, it's beautiful. And it's one that from what everything I've seen, the world building is solid. I know I would love it, Olivia. I need to read it, not love it. I already am sold on the book. But yeah, I think I'll say one thing really quick, and maybe since you've already have more you can add. But I will say it's something worth playing around. It's a hard one to give like this is how this will affect this and this, because what frames will fundamentally do more than like give the world building, generally speaking, is they will like the framing influences the pace and the information that your audience is receiving when they're receiving it and how long they spend, taking it in. And so when you do that, you can have a lot that says a lot about the world, just by how we're looking at it. Is this a wide shot? We're meant to see more. Are we close up? Where this is a tighter space, this is more claustrophobic, etc. That you can use. Would kind of be my 2 cents with just one last thing is like there are specialty like borders that you can do like in like illuminations, or like I'll occasionally do this with Heaven Sim with like some Art Nouveau-y things flowing in and out that you can do to bring in a lot of world building as well. I don't know if that's what is done in Witch Hat Atelier, but I know it's something that has happened in comics, especially if you're doing like fantasy. But yeah, I think that's all I'd really have to say on that specifically.
I was going to say also one thing too. They, by the way, Marcus, they do a lot of really fun, like creative things with like panel art and stuff.
That's kind of what I figured.
Yeah, it's awesome. But then also, one thing I wanted to point out too is bleeds are actually really important to creating an immersive experience in comics. And the reason why bleeds do that is because it kind of like breaks a frame. So even like people are always aware that a frame is there. And so if you break a frame, it's kind of like it's spilling into your world. Is sort of the high concept psychological point of it. I just think it provides better like immersive illustration experience. So I would experiment with that too, in terms of layout. And then the other thing too is oftentimes some of the comics that have the most impact in terms of the world spend a lot of pages getting you to fall in love with the world. And that's kind of tricky because it requires a lot more drawing. But I think that it's worthwhile to like spend the time to like just introduce. The comic that I'm working on right now has a whole page that's just like a throwaway page, kind of, where a character is just exploring a city. And I love doing that kind of thing because it provides people the opportunity to actually like get lost in our world, in the world that we're building. So I would think about that kind of thing too.
Yeah, if world building is an important part of your story, give us time to be in the world. Start figuring out this wibbly fin. There we go. Nice. Yeah, I do think that is another thing to consider too, is like there are some forms of story that if you want to tell it well, it's going to take time. And that's an unfortunate reality. There are a lot of like things that you can do to save time. A lot of it honestly comes down to designing things to be efficient. You know,
Yeah.
like if all of your characters have a ton of details everywhere, you can do that. But if you're the only one writing and illustrating everything, it's going to take you a lot longer. Um, and that's going to mean that like you're going to have to make compromises in that. Um, and similar with like world building. There's a reason that like Heaven's Hymn, I'm only uploading 2 pages a week right now, and it's not because I like have. I mean, currently I'm not working on the pages, but like this is most like this, and then designing action figures. Like that's my job, right? I don't have another job that I have to work right now, which is really really nice. Um, so like I have a lot of time to spend on it, but in order to get what you want done, if you want to like give your audience time in the world, you have to spend time to draw it, if that makes sense. And I do think you could probably chart a graph of like time invested in giving people like pacing and like giving your audience time in the world to the amount that they care about the world. um I don't know if it's a hard and fast rule of a graph, but I do think it helps. Is that Eric? As in
Well,
Eric, the my Eric? If you're not the
I think
Eric that we both know very closely and is like our best friend, then um, let us know, because okay, good. I'm like, it'd be real awkward if we're like, oh, my beloved Eric, and they're like, I don't know who you are. um, well, welcome, Eric. We're glad you're here. If you have any questions about world building in comics, let us know. But yeah, as we continue, I think one of the things that is important to do also is kind of this stepping back from um like environments, because we have been pretty focused on like environments and backgrounds, which are very important in world building. But I also think like there are some pieces of media that do really good world building and don't necessarily rely on environments. And I don't think you should rely on environments in world building. The thought that came to mind, because we were talking about like food and world building earlier, is Delicious in Dungeon. Because I think like that one has really solid world building that does pull on a lot of tropes, right? Like it's phenomenal world building for a very tropey slash cliche standard medieval fantasy, right? What makes it interesting is that it's specific,
right.
and there are things that are developed, but where the world building really works is it's giving us a very specific lens to see the world in, and then developing and expanding on that lens, right? Yes, Olivia, the recorded version will be up later. It automatically posts on my YouTube, so it'll be there as soon as we're done, if you gotta go. So yeah, we will be there. By that I mean the recording will be there. We will be here. But yeah, so I think it does really well for a few reasons, right? It's got a very specific lens that it builds on. It's got and like it develops that, and
when you say lens, sorry, Marcus, when you say lens, are you meaning like point of view, or what exactly do you mean by that?
Kind of like premise. We're looking through at the world largely through the lens of food, right? We don't spend a lot of time talking about the geopolitics of the world, though we do touch on that because food is something that is foundational to just the human experience. And so we see how that specific part of the premise influences and connected to everything else, which is fascinating. So we have a very specific thing that is given time and developed. And then the things related to that are also given time and developed, right? So the biology of the dungeon is given time and developed. Things have ecological niches, right? They hunt, they have ways that they interact with each other, and that all is part of how they catch food and what they cook and how they eat it, etc. And also how like our characters engage in the dungeon ecosystem, which makes the world really interesting and feel really alive. But then the other aspect that I think they do a really good job is in the character designs. They're not super complicated, right? None of them are super out there as far as like, wow, that's, does super like busy or big, I guess. They're not super flashy, but they are designed well, right? I love the little detail that like Marcel has her hair done differently every single time, because that's something that a human would do. So as you like add things that make the characters more developed, you can take opportunities because they're in the world. As you bring that together, you create world building, because that's something that someone in this setting would believably do. One of few things take me out of a world more than characters living anachronistically, if that makes sense, in a way that doesn't make sense for the world that they're in. Like every time I'm watching a fantasy anime and someone shows up and they're just wearing like a suit and tie, I'm like, that can be part of your premise. Like that can be part of like the narrative treatise, and I know a lot of people love that. But that always immediately makes me ask, like, okay, well, if you know anything about fashion history, you know that like suits weren't allowed to be a thing until they had certain amount of technology, certain weaves. Where's the fabric coming from? If this is a pseudo medieval society, how are they getting the fabric to make the suit? How are they making the structuring for it? What techniques are they doing? Where are they getting I'm part of this is because I've done a lot of that research for Heaven's Hymn and for my own projects, and because I'm a nerd and I like that. But that's something that I feel like when you design characters to work and build on the world as opposed to just being in it or actively going against it, then you're going to get a much richer world experience when you engage with these characters.
I will say though, so I was watching. So I haven't seen any One Piece the anime, but me and my wife were watching One Piece the live action show, and I don't know if this is true of the anime, but I imagine it is true. There's it's pirates, right? But then there's just people in baseball caps, and it's actually a super awesome part of the world building of that show because because of the anachronisticness of it sort of sells the idea that this world is really, really, really wacky, and you're never going to be like prepared for what's going to happen. So I'll push back against that just a little bit in the sense that there is something you can do in terms of just like tone that might trump history in certain contexts, but it depends on it depends on the style of your show, right? And I think One Piece gets away with it because it's really weird, and that's kind of like the conceit of it is like, this is an odd show, and you're going to kind of laugh a little bit while you see the action and all the fun stuff, if your story, what?
Oh, I was just say One Piece is a hard one for me specifically because of that. But that's just because I really like pirates as pirates, and I look at this like, nothing, like technically they're pirates, but it doesn't scratch any of the itches that I have for pirates. But also, again, that is a personal bias thing. That is not this is bad because of this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I think I'm kind of on the fence about it, because I think like you can get away with a lot of things if it's about tone, if it's about the story that you're telling, Another one that like comes to mind is like the bad guys, like the DreamWorks animated show. It's like they're animals and then they're people, and it's whatever. And part of that's because it's a children's animation, but like it works because it's just kind of a silly idea, and also that's the conceit that they're like the animals that people don't like. He's the big bad wolf, and there's been stories told about him or whatever. So if they weren't animals, then the idea would fall apart. And so I think that there's you can break these like historical rules if you have a very, very strong sense of presence. But what doesn't work is when you've promised me that you're going to give me something serious and like well thought through, and then it doesn't deliver,
Yeah. Well, and like there are definitely cases where I worded things more strongly than I agree with you that like it's not a hard and fast rule. But more than anything, if you're looking to do world building, another way you can do it is through the character design. And that can also be world building, like you mentioned with like One Piece, where it's like this is establishing expectations for the world. Even if it's not lore, that's still world building.
Right.
Even if I personally am not always a fan of the choices that are made.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, it's all about the concept. I think is like verisimilitude, right? Like, how much can someone buy into a story, right? Mm-hmm. And for you require a very high level of verisimilitude in your stories, where it's like this
generally,
has to be, like this has like there has to be history there that's developed all these things, that have, that make it the way that it is. But not every story operates on that same principle,
Mm-hmm.
Scott Pilgrim, like the movie Scott Pilgrim, not the comics, but the movie, like there's zero verisimilitude in that film. Like it just does whatever the heck it wants, and it works because it's a comedy, right? So that's the other thing too. The genre that you're working in really, really does affect like what you're doing. So
yeah, no, 100%. And like, I don't want to misrepresent myself as like I only watch things if it's historically accurate. Well, what it is my favorite kinds of stories are consistently the ones that have very believable world building and operate within the constraints of their world building. That's not to say that like one is definitively better, but I will say, again, depending on the genre, if you're telling an epic fantasy that you want to hit like those epic, rewarding, like big dramatic beats, and like have people feel immersed in the world, then you can't get away with as much as if you weren't, again, as if you were doing a comedy, or psychological thriller or whatnot.
Right.
But
well, I think there's a principle, which is that your story is like the world building is constrained to the level of story that you're trying to tell, or the goal that you're trying to get. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Eric has a question, and A said historical accuracy isn't necessary in most cases, but we need historically plausible details. And I think that's pretty good. Like you need.
I really.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying I really like the word believable.
Yeah.
Because it's not a Vikings didn't wear helmets like that. It's a, does this feel like a world that could actually exist?
Yeah. And I will say, with that plausibility, your plausibility meter changes depending on what your story is and what your audience is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of comedies need very low, like you don't need a whole lot of plausibility because we want it to succeed because it's wacky, right? Like we want like Toy Story works because you just want the toys to be alive. It's way more interesting if they are, and it's way more interesting if Buzz doesn't realize that he like doesn't try to talk to Andy, like that whole concept like falls apart because Buzz doesn't realize he's a toy, Toy Story. But it's way more interesting of a story if he just does play along with that aspect of the story, and no one cares. So,
I was going to say Emperor's New Groove is another fantastic example of that.
Yeah, exactly. Like
there is no logic.
Yeah. But it's delightful and people like it, and because it's plausible in the to the extent of, well, if the evil advisor lady has a secret lab in the basement, and turns the emperor into a llama, then pretty much anything else can happen in this world,
Mhm.
So I think consistency is also very important, like plausible consistency.
Yeah.
Okay, so Eric asked, what is maybe your least conventional tip for world building? And what was some inspiration that came out of left field?
Ooh. Least conventional. If you got, I might need a second to think on this one.
Only draw dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures and everything.
Uh-huh. Yeah. The more dinosaurs you draw, the better you'll be at world building, guys. Least conventional. I don't so it's hard because like I don't this tip that I'm about to say, I don't think that this is unconventional for world building, but it can take you to unconventional places of world building, if that makes sense, like unconventional worlds and stuff. But I think just like be thinking and connecting disparate ideas in the real world, right? And this gets down to just viz dev in general and just being an artist and making things interesting. What we do is we're not creating original things. We are creating interesting things, if that makes sense. And, when the focus is shifted from being unique to being interesting, I think you have a much better time of actually doing, like, making things that are good. But like, there are lots of things that are interesting. And if there's anything that you find yourself like drawn to or interested in, lean on that, see where that takes you. Because if you find it interesting, chances are somebody else will find it interesting at some point, Thank you so much. I love you. Becca just brought me dinner and I love her a lot. But like, I remember when so the version of Heaven's Hymn that's up on Webtoon is my second time doing the whole first volume. And so like I did the whole thing and I went back and started redoing it. And when I went back to redo it, one of the questions I asked myself was like, what about me like is unique to my voice that makes this story interesting, that like I am interested in, that I would like to see. And one of the big things and Spencer like joked about this was prehistoric life. Like I am so fascinated with paleontology, and leaning into that enabled me to like make some really interesting design choices and add things into the world that wouldn't have been there otherwise, and that have made it so much more interesting. So if look at what you are already interested in and see what you can do with that, I think, and see how you can apply it in ways that you might not initially think up, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just going to say a little bit of research goes a really, really long way too. Like when I started developing my webcomic, it was like I just had a couple of characters that I liked and some like tropes that I liked. And then I started just studying mythology. And I like found some like ancient Babylonian like creation myths and stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is really cool. And it created this whole, like, that's where the whole basis for my world came from, right? It was just like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if this is like where the world was created from this, like from these myths or whatever, right? And so I think like just a little bit of research helps you with creating a lot of things, right? There's an adage from Robert McKee, who wrote a book called Story. It's about screenwriting. There's something that he said in there, which is that like if you do, I don't remember exactly the exact quote, but it's basically if you do the correct amount of research, your story you'll essentially gather enough information that your story is going to start writing itself. Like you're just going to sit down, you're going to know what to do with the pieces if you gather enough stuff. And that really stuck with me. And I don't do nearly enough research in terms of like looking at stuff and like finding things. But research doesn't have to be hard. It just has to be things that you're interested in, right? So I'm interested in ancient culture. I'm interested in ancient mythology. And that's really where things started to like click for me. So find what you're passionate about. I'm sure the person who wrote Delicious in Dungeon is actually somewhat passionate about food, and then they also like me, obviously, right? So they took these two parts of themselves and combined them together. And that's kind of where some of the best ideas come from is by taking things that aren't necessarily related. And that's actually the main act of creativity, is taking things that aren't related and mixing them together. So
yeah. No, I love research. Well, and what's also awesome too about like living when we do now, is that there's it's so easy to get access to information and learn, without having to go to a library or take a class. But I would also like recommend, if you are in a position where you're taking classes. So like Spencer and I both recently graduated from a university, right? We went to art school, but it was also just a general university. And so we had to do like general classes that weren't art. And some of my favorite classes that I ever took were not at all related to art, because they were fascinating and they inspired so much. Like I took a astronomy class with Eric. He was in that one with me. And that class did so much to fuel my creativity, and like learning was so good. So like one of the best ways to be a good designer, to be a good artist, to be a good world builder is to be a good learner and to love to learn. Again, seconding everything that Spencer just said, a little research goes a long way, and take time, like opportunities you have to learn. I've talked to a lot of people, going through like art school with me, and oftentimes, sometimes there's a sentence like, I wish I could just do art classes, and I wish I could just learn about art. And I'm like, that's also great. And like, I could resonate with that when I was taking classes that I hated, which happens, right? But any opportunity you have to learn anything, chances are you'll find something that's really interesting in that. And anything that's interesting can become a seed for something fascinating in world building or just in art in general. So if you're in college, take classes that aren't art and learn. Be invested in them. But
I wanted to ask Marcus one thing. How I wanted to dig a little bit more into the actual like art side of things, like specifically the mechanics of drawing and designing. So I was one, like, just maybe for people who are curious about like how you go about creating the look and the feel of things. So what are you thinking about when you are doing your designs for your environments or for your world?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is context, right? So first and foremost is story. So when there's a character, like who is the character, et cetera, et cetera. For the world, like what is the history here? What is, who lives here? Why are things the way that they are? Those kinds of questions. So from like a thought standpoint, the biggest thing is just asking questions consistently. I think is the most helpful thing. But as I get going, it's a little hard to answer for Heaven's Hymn specifically, because I have a very specific look that I've developed for so long. So it's hard to be like, well, this is what I was thinking when I designed this the other day, 10 years ago. Although nothing looks anything like it did when I was drawing it 10 years ago. So I didn't design any of this 10 years ago. I designed all of this in the last 2-3 years.
And where are you pulling your look from? Is it just from like artists you like? Is it from like other comic artists or movies, or what
Yeah.
Like the
So a lot of like, especially the launching point is artists I like, and a lot of like the reference that I look up. So like the artists that I probably reference the most for Heaven's Hymn are Mike Mignola, Mobius, Tim McBurney, and Jake Wyatt. we get this kind of combination between all those of like bold graphic shapes and beautiful like gradiated colors into line illustration, and I love it. Everything that they're doing, but I also really love like Art Nouveau. Was a big inspiration, and so a lot of it is the things that I love that inspire me. And a lot of the thought process started like, well, what comics make me want to pick up the comic and read it? And what comics are telling stories similar to what I'm telling? And there was a pretty strong like correlation to that, right? Whereas like my favorite stories were oftentimes the ones that looked the best as well, and were similar to what I'm trying to tell. And so like the intersect was pretty big. In finding
so you're just kind of following your natural like inclinations of like, this looks good, this this is I'm not as interested in that.
At least from starting off, the more I drew the comic, the more it kind of settled. When I first started, I can show you kind of the first page that I did, the first version. When I first started, it was pretty different, and like you can see some like carryover, I guess. But you can see like the people that I was referencing, and like what I liked was not the same, if that makes sense. So like I really love the illustrator Keith Thompson. He did the Leviathan book illustrations. He was one of my favorite illustrators growing up, and he does very detailed, super hatched graphite drawings. And so if you look at like,
sorry, Marcus, I'm going to interject. Did you just notice that they made a Leviathan anime on Netflix?
Yes, I've seen the first half of it. I haven't finished it, but it's pretty good.
I haven't watched it yet, so I just am curious.
But yeah, well, it's been really cool. Slight tangent on that. A lot of the art in it, you can tell that they're paying very specific homage to the art from the book, to Keith Thompson's illustrations and stuff.
That's cool.
Because like a lot of the scenes are like shot, like you sit there and you're like, I remember this from the book. This is the exact shot that he drew, but now it's like a beautiful watercolor landscape in this anime. And it's really cool that they did that. But yeah, so like going in, I really liked the hatched look, and so I did a lot more hatching in here. Still not like a ridiculous amount. Also, I don't know why his nails are white. I don't remember giving him painted nails. He's a fabulous king, I guess. But like there, you can see there's a lot more detail, and generally like the art fundamentals aren't as good, right? The detail management isn't as good. Its hierarchy is not there. The gesture's not there. The lines aren't as interesting. Like there's all of that that's changed as I've gotten better at drawing. But as I started, I learned what was efficient. Was the other side of things. So like there's the aesthetic, like this is what I like, this is what I would like it to look like, and then there's a style that develops from the shortcuts I need to take. I think it was you who actually I don't know if this was a quote that you were sharing with me, but when I first heard this idea, I said like style is just the shortcuts taken for efficiency. And like I don't think that like
who said that. That's not me. That's from someone, but
okay.
But yeah, no, I really do feel like that's true.
Yeah, I'm like, and I don't think like it's 100% like this is only to be efficient, because like I could draw this in a more efficient way, right?
Right.
Like there are choices that I add that I technically don't need for aesthetic, because I like it, because I think it's good, but also so much of it is because it's efficient, right? Oh, what there's
I think one of the benefits of going to art school too is just learning that like, oh, actually a lot of the efficient ways to do things are also just the more aesthetic ways to do things. I think as an amateur
take a gesture
artist,
drawing class.
Right? As an amateur artist, you start out and you think, oh yeah, like I'm just gonna overload this drawing with so much detail and so much like, crazy amounts of form and stuff like that. And it really is learning how to like showcase the right amount of detail. I think comics especially are about that, because you're trying to make things legible. So
And also, if you're like me and you have a 10-book series that you want to get out before you're dead, you can't afford to spend, all day, every day doing super detailed stuff. But also, again, I don't know that I don't know that super detailed always makes it better anyway. Like last time I talked about the Kingdom Come comics, which are gorgeous, like beautifully illustrated. I love the art, but it makes it like I don't know if it's as good of a comic because the art is as like detailed as it is compared to other things like All-Star Superman, which when you look at the art isn't super like nearly as rendered or as detailed, but it's evocative and it's compelling. You look at you look at Mike Mignola, right? I think we keep bringing him up. We'll probably keep bringing him up. But like his work is not super complicated. It's just really well designed and efficiently done. There's never an excess of detail. And that creates a really interesting look, right? So yeah, I would not let yourself get too bogged down with what was I saying?
With detail or
with rendering and detail.
With rendering, yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I guess in summary, answering your question is a combination of a lot of things. What I liked, what I knew that I didn't like, and then what worked and what I could do in time. And the more I drew, the more it developed. So that's the other thing is just draw a lot and think critically about your art. Don't let yourself just draw things. Don't let yourself get caught in the like, well, I think it's my style that I draw things badly. Therefore, you can't tell me that it's bad because that's just my style. There's such thing as bad style, right? Like that. I feel like I could come on and say like, I think that style bad. Now, some people might like it. That's great. That doesn't mean that I have to not think that it's bad art.
Yeah. I think the big thing is don't limit yourself to what you can and can't draw. Like if you what's a good style versus a bad style for me, like a good style, you could draw anything in that style. And like it would be readable as whatever it is that you're drawing. Bad style is it's limited by the constraints of what the style are. And there's always going to be like, I don't know, some things that you can't do, right? But like, I don't know. Yeah. For me, it's like that really is what the differentiation is between good and bad style.
I agree. And I think tying this all back into world building, the style can inform a lot about your world, right? So like going back to like Stand Still, Stay Silent, if you've seen any, let me see if I can just find a page to give as an example, because I feel bad just being like, this thing that you should look at. But if you look at the pages, the style informs a lot about the story that we're going to be told and the world in which it takes, right? One of the things that I took, this is actually another one of the big stylistic influences for Heaven's Hymn, was Stand Still, Stay Silent, because they will have these big like chunks of black ink that then that she like carves into to create shapes and depth. Let me see if I can find a better example of a page with this on it. Yeah, okay. This is a good one. Let me see if I can just paste this directly from the internet into Clip Studio. Oh, it's so tiny. We'll see if it looks any good. Okay, it's super low res. Let me try something else to show you guys. We're just gonna go to the website actually and look at the page, and I'm gonna show you if it will load. Uh-oh.
You're gonna crash your computer?
Well, I have so many tabs open, and I'm also running low on storage. And I just
comic somewhere on there.
Well, I actually have that on an external hard drive.
Oh yeah. As you should.
As I should, yeah.
Back up your files.
Yes, back them up. Do not just let them be on your computer. I need to get them into my Dropbox because I have Dropbox. I just don't have everything on them. But I also have it on Google Drive as well. So I've got 3 different places for it. Because I do not want to lose. I have had nightmares of like losing my hard drive and then thus losing everything, and it's terrifying. But yeah. So one of the things that she does is she'll have these big black shapes that she carves into. So
Are you sharing something with us, Marcus?
It's not loading. So
it's not loading. Okay, you're just gonna talk about it.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna talk about it. No, by not loading, I mean it's still trying to load. But what that I'll make a new layer and kind of illustrate so like there'd be a big old thing here, and then she comes in with like this like detail like this with the negative space. It's like this is like a wood texture, right? That's on the thing, and you'll see I do this too in Heaven Sim because I really like it. And what she'll do is make a layer on top of that and then like add gradation to the ink right there, which is so cool. But that does a lot for informing us about the world because we have these big dark black shapes. And we're like, oh, and it's in a post-apocalyptic setting in Scandinavia. And so having these things and like a line weight that mimics a lot of like Norse runes where you kind of have this like grittiness to it. And it also brings just like other like Nordic and Norse design into it. And having these big dark shapes, we get a tonal idea for the world. We get a setting idea for the world. And it feels really developed. And this is like not something that is part of like the lore or, you know, even part of composition. This is just the way that she's illustrating it. And it's really fascinating.
I think that's a really good point about like how texture actually just informs world building as well. You know, it's like how gritty and run down things are. That informs the reader about something about your world. Like nothing is new and shiny. And you know.
Yeah. Well, like you look at Heaven's Hymn, I've made a point not to draw anything with like a ruler, or a super straight line. Everything is free-handed. I'll do like sketches with like perspective grids and rulers and stuff to make sure like buildings are in perspective and have straight lines. But the final inks are always no stabilization, no ruler, because I really want the organic line, and I think that adds a lot to the world, right? It makes the world feel more alive and more organic, right? Less mechanical, less constructed, which adds a lot to, I think, you know, the theming and this world that is like this big natural historical world where like, and it is post-apocalyptic. It's just, you know, also high fantasy, and so it's a different kind of post-apocalypse. But I also just, if you feel like your lines are bad, try turning stabilization off for a little bit and see how they look. Because by bad, I mean not expressive. If you feel like your lines are like that and you're not trying to get them to look like that, like stabilization has its uses. But
I use quite a bit of stabilization with mine, with my art. And it's because I really like super clean, sharp line work that has a lot of variation to it. I vary line through other things, through thickness and through where I place it and stuff, less through texture. So we could talk about line work some other time.
Yeah, I was like, we could do a whole stream on it. Sound off in the chat if you want a whole line work stream, I guess. Also, yeah, let us know. Like, this is a lot more casual than like the other streams that I've done, because we're kind of just hanging out while drawing. So let me know what you think. I think next week I'll probably do another paleo art one or something. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that every 4 weeks. We'll see. It also just might not happen next week, depending on where we are with FanX prep. So I do not want to promise and then not deliver. But also, that's not important right now. Yeah, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss? You were talking about like world building and how we draw things. Was there more that you were
anything
saying?
I wanted to say about it?
Well, I feel like I derailed us.
Oh, you said some really great things though.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I don't know. As far as like fundamentals go, are there things that you would say like have helped you like get better at drawing? Like at least just making it easier to do world building stuff. I know for me, it's like perspectives, like super high up on that list.
No, if you understand perspective, it's so much easier to draw things in perspective, you know, and just make it look interesting, and make it not like overwhelming. So understanding perspective, I think, is a big one. Honestly, the biggest thing for me, like, there's a bit of a paradigm shift when I started thinking of environments as characters in a way, because like I think a lot of us go into this because we love designing characters. I love designing characters, right? We connect with characters. Characters are the ones with the cool costumes and the cool props, and they're the ones who, you know, we see the faces. They're the ones, you know, through whom the story is told. But when I started thinking of the world as a character as well, I think that enabled me to kind of shift up my perspective and invest a bit more in world building, visually, right? Because I think when I started, doing backgrounds felt like a chore to make things look complete. If I didn't have a background, it didn't look complete. And so I would do a background. But it was like, I guess I'll do a background because I have to. But when it shifts from, I guess I'll do a background because I have to this environment is a crucial character in the story, just like that change of perspective is really helpful.
Yeah. I think recognizing that like your primary like I guess what's the word, like communicator of mood in your story is going to be your environment, right? Is your world. So thinking about it in terms of that, like what is the feeling that you want your reader to get when they're consuming your story? Well, you're gonna discover it through the presentation of your world. I think that really does help for sure.
Well, and kind of what you were mentioning earlier when we were talking about like world building for things that aren't as like grounded, you know, it's so important, and this is kind of ties back to with everything, but like with environments, like it does a ton to establish expectations, right? Whether or not you're planning to subvert those expectations or what, if there's a story that opens on in a cute little flower shop and everything is like fluffy, then like my expectation is this is like a slice of life romance, something based on past experience with comics. If it subverts that expectation, that's fantastic. Like, it's great. But that's going to be what is established in the eyes of the reader at that moment. And so the more that, like, I don't know, that's thought through, I think the better things are for like a reader's experience. I think honestly something that a piece of media that I have been a little hyper focused on this last week that does a really good job of a lot of this is Bionicle. Because from the beginning, right, there are things like we're on this tropical island and there are things that's like, okay, on the surface level, interesting, but the way that it's portrayed, the mood is kind of dark and kind of serious, and there's like this like edge and like this coolness to it that you get from the very beginning, right? Like that first commercial, we have like this narrator, and he's like, "This guy is so cool," and you know, we see all our characters doing extreme sports and all these other things that like establishes this tone that, firstly, that there's a lot more under the surface than what we're seeing, which was so interesting, like as a kid, because it's like, oh, there's a lot more to this than just what we're seeing, and that's cool.
Yeah.
And then you know it progresses, and it's just great. We love Bionicle in this house.
Yeah. Well, I think Bionicle is a really good example of a very kind of traditional fantasy setup, right? You have a sort of these, for lack of a better term, like knight characters who are protecting these villagers, you know, and it's like that's like we've seen that 1,000 times in a bunch of different ways, but then they're robots on a tropical island, you know, like they, and then they take it even further, right? Like every time they like iterate on it, it's a new thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, and what was cool too is like you have the iteration, but as the iteration develops, it's also like you can, you know, you hit a thing and you're like, oh wait, I remember them mentioning that. Oh wait, that ties into this thing from the very beginning, which also just, you know, talking about world building, you know, and the idea of, oh crap, I lost my train of thought. Wait, it's coming back to me. Oh, I just realized my camera's blinking at like a weird angle. There we go. You can see me a bit better. World building, this idea of accessibility, right? There's a question asked earlier. So how to have world building without just doing like big old lore dump, right? And a lot of that is in telling a story that feels approachable at the beginning, while still conveying that there's more, right? Because like the premise of like the very beginning of Bionicle is pretty simple. 6 elemental heroes defend villagers from monsters. Cool. You know, like that's pretty easy to digest. And then you can get into like their specific, and they have these masks that give them special powers. You're like, cool, got that. And then eventually we get to the absolutely insane lore, you know, that progresses over the 10 years that it was around. And like it still makes sense because from the beginning there was this like implication that there was more going on beneath the surface, you know.
Yeah. Which requires
expectations.
Yeah, which requires planning on the creator's part for sure. But I think it's well worth it, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the fact that like this is a toy line that hasn't had a new toy in a decade now, and there are still a ton of adults like us who are talking about it.
Yeah.
Like speaks to the impact and the quality that it was. Yeah. So for you, Spencer, as someone who like has kind of this background in animation, I wonder, like, when approaching world building, you know, from like that kind of production pipeline, how much, like, in your experience of the world building happens kind of in that planning stage, and how much like kind of happens as it goes and as it develops? Because I know a lot of it, like we were talking about with Bionicle, right, has to be planned out, but also like, you know, some of it is not and just kind of happens.
Yeah. Well, I think that. Well, do you want me to talk about animation? Or do you want me to talk about my approach to comic making?
Maybe both.
Okay.
Start with approach to comic making.
Okay. Well, so with me with comic making, well, and I guess with animation too. Like animation goes through different processes of planning, right? So there's a really loose blue sky stage at the beginning where kind of any project can be kind of anything. And then as you get more and more invested in a project, the more decisions have to be made. That's kind of like the way that the animation works. And the reason for it is because it's really like high. There's a lot of, it's a lot more expensive than comics, right? Comics are usually like 1 or 2 people working on something, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas animation, it can be a team of, hundreds of people working on a single project. And so what you want to do is you want to decide quicker with fewer amount of people before you get into the weeds of it, right? And a lot of the more recent animated like movies and stuff that haven't done super well, it's because they haven't really locked in on what they're making until they are like halfway through the thing, and then they're like, "Oh, this doesn't work," and we have to abandon it, right? So the hope with animation is that you get through all of the bugs before you even like make anything, right? And they have various teams. Like I do storyboards, so like storyboards are like the whole job is basically just there to avoid making costly mistakes down the road, when you're actually producing it. The benefit with comics is that you can kind of make it on the fly. Like you can be working on a page and be like, oh, this doesn't work, and we can throw it away. And it's pretty cheap to throw away a page of comics, even though it might not feel that cheap for you, as an individual creator. It's relatively cheaper than they do it in animation. But because I'm from that background, what I like to do a lot of is I like to think through a lot of the story beforehand. And I'd say, so my approach to world building, I think, is I like to think through what is it about the world that would get someone like interested in. What is it about it that's like unique and different from anything else that I've seen before? And that can happen in story, that can happen in the world, that can happen in all sorts of different things. But usually with world building, it's like, okay, what is it about this thing that's like interesting or fun? And then what are things that kind of do a similar sort of thing really, really well? And I'll pull from that, and I'll try to pull from a wide variety of things. One kind of fun activity to do is you take something from one media that you really like, so say like a comic or something, and then you take something completely opposite genre and a completely different medium, like your favorite comedy TV show or something like that, and you try to merge them together and see what would it be like with these characters in this world or these characters in this world, and like how would that change up like your expectations for it. And that's just kind of a lot of my approach to storytelling is just like smashing ideas that shouldn't work together and seeing what sticks. But then I'd say for me, so like tone is really, really important too. Like I like to go about trying to figure out like what is the tone, what's the age range that I'm going for? Like who am I trying to tell? Like who would be my audience? Who would be interested in this story? And then creating the lore that's appropriate for that, right? A 12-year-old's not necessarily going to want to sit through like Lord of the Rings, like reading the book Lord of the Rings. They probably watch the movie, but a 16. So, well, yeah. Maybe.
I also wasn't allowed to watch the movies until I read the books, so I was very incentivized.
You were a very determined dyslexic kid.
Listen, it was an ordeal, and I remember very little from the books themselves. But I remembered I really liked Return of the King.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
no. I think it's really good. Like, and this is kind of speaking to like things beyond the what we traditionally think of when we think of world building, right? Which is the lore, the setting, into like taking into account the audience, right? And then like the broader aspects of just storytelling. Who is this for? Why would they be interested? And then doing stuff to follow that, right? Help people be interested in it all, which I think is really fascinating. We're about at 2 hours, so we should probably start wrapping up. But yeah, if anyone in the chat has any last questions, Oh, okay, there we go. Ooh, getting into characters. All right, this might be our last question. John coming in at the last second. Okay, do you have any tips to make characters likable and grounded? You're great for having to go a bit. Welcome back. We're glad you're back. Yeah, so I can go really quickly. A lot of it, again, comes back to specificity. It's not trauma. It's not making them quirky. Though there are things that can be quirky. If a character's first read is quirky, it does nothing for me. Because what does that mean? It kind of doesn't mean much anymore in our current media landscape. It used to mean something. But when every character and their dog is quirky, no one is. But think about them as people. So I think it's worth stepping out, looking at your life, right, and cataloging what are things that I care about, what are things that are interesting to me, what do I think about when I'm not thinking about the plot of this story that's happening around me. It's helpful to have answers to things that exist outside of the plot of the story, so that when you are portraying them within the plot of the story, you can add elements that make them fleshed out and interesting, and then you have things to play with and integrate into the story. As a quick example, and Spencer can attest this, in my first pass of Heaven's Hymn, Nissa, who's the main character, was kind of a big ol' nothing burger. She suffered a lot from I am protagonist, all of her motivation was directly related to things that had happened to her in the plot. So the only reason she did anything was because this happened to her and this happened to her. And this isn't to say that characters shouldn't react and respond to the plot, but if you have a character who has dreams and goals and ambitions and desires outside of the events that are happening around them, then you can much more easily have them react and respond to the events in a way that is likable and grounded and believable. And so as a brief note, Nis is one of the things when we first meet her, she loves animals. And she likes to draw and she wants to understand and learn things, which is a part of her character that is relevant in the story as she's learning magic, right? And down the line, and that understanding becomes important. She's not a animal magician, right? She doesn't do animal magic or anything. That's not a part of her character, but that aspect of her character makes it a lot easier for me to write her and have her feel interesting and likable when things are happening around her, because I know that this is something that she loves, and so it's going to be factored into her reactions to things and what she talks about and says and does.
Yeah, I think that's good. I was going to say kind of along the same lines or similar lines. I think you can write a lot, you can give your characters any personality. They don't really start to become interesting until you start asking the questions of what does this character want and how do they go about getting what they want. And that can be anything, right? Their wants can be anything. I generally try to give my characters they have this big emotional need. They have something that they're looking for emotionally, but then they also have little goals, or they have a concept of what that is that will help them achieve that, right? So if your character is, I don't know, a warrior and they just want to have a day off, but no one's going to let them have a day off. That starts to become interesting because then they're going to come into conflict with what their expectations are, and that kind of thing. And that's really how you generate stories is by putting characters into conflict with the world around them.
Yeah, I would say there's a really useful resource actually for just breaking some of these down is the many different personality models and tests. Spencer and I've talked a lot about specifically the Enneagram for this. This is not to say that you should make characters who are default versions of any of the Enneagrams or Myers-Briggs personality types. or like approach a character like, I want to write an ENFP character, because you're going to, it's similar to saying, I want to write an insert trope and nothing more. So like that is not going to lead to a developed character. But as you like work through your ideas, what a lot of these personality things are really good at is isolating and identifying and labeling like core motivations, fears, desires, those kinds of things. And so you can look at like, well, this is what I think this character fits in. What do they want? What are they afraid of? What matters to them? Why do they care about certain things? What do they care about? And a lot of those models, especially like Enneagram, focuses a lot on like fear, and like what characters, what like people are afraid of. So that can do a lot to like flesh out characters and make them understandable. Oftentimes what makes characters not likable and not grounded is when they don't feel fleshed out, right? When they feel unbelievable. And this is one where I do feel like, similarly what it's talking about, like believability and world building, sometimes that's the point, right? Where this character is so stupid that like, how could anyone be that dumb? Haha, it's funny, but you have to establish that and make sure that works. If you're trying to tell a serious story and that's your protagonist, you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
So
I think it's like terms of it's just like inconsistency, right? Like if we, well, actually, Michaela and I just read Michaela's my wife. We read a little started reading a story that she had picked up back in like middle school or something like that, and she was just curious about it anyway. And she was like, I remember this being so bad, but why was it bad? And we read the first chapter and we were like, oh, because the main character switches like what she wants every 10 seconds, like, is she scared for her life? Is she trying to prove herself? Is she depressed and wants to just end everything? Like, it was not consistent across the board. So I think keeping things consistent, like this character wants this thing and they're going to go after it until something stops them or until they realize that it's a bad thing to go after, I think is really, that's what's going to make it interesting. Anyway, we should probably go over character sometime, Marcus, too.
Yeah.
We can talk about.
I feel like that's when we'll probably want to make like another slideshow.
Yeah. Because there's a lot to be talked about with character, because it's really where like that's the backbone of story. You can have a really, really boring world and a fairly uninteresting plot, and if the characters are good, people will still watch it. So or like yeah, parts to worlds that are weird or bad or don't work or break immersion, break interest. But if you have really, really good characters, what it is as humans we are programmed to care more about people, and also we tell stories about characters. You're gonna have a really hard time selling a story to a reader if there isn't a character. We invite you all to try.
Yeah. Yeah, if you've managed it, let us know. I'll be fascinated.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like there have been like avant-garde stuff like that's happened where it's like there really is no character, it's just nonsense. And I'm like, that's cool. That's not what we do. Or what we read or watch, really.
Yeah.
All
right, should we wrap it up?
I think we should wrap it up. So in conclusion, I hope you learned something about world building in comics. Let me know in the comments or in the chat what you thought about this like more casual kind of rant / just discussion stream. Hopefully it was useful. I got most of my inking done on this print, which is nice. As far as like announcements go, so this ties in. Spencer and I will both be at FanX Salt Lake in 2 weeks, so the 25th, 26th, and 27th of September. If you want to come by and say hi, we'll be selling stuff there. I'll have copies of Heaven's Hymn. Spencer's going to have copies of Witches of Babel. We'll have other stuff too. like my limited edition little Pestle figurines. If you want one, there's only 12. So, it's not going to be, I hope they all sell out, and they're going to come with this illustration as a print. So that'll be exciting. Volume 2 of Heaven's Hymn is uploading on Webtoon as of today. We had our first actual pages go up, so go check that out if you want to stay up. If you've been waiting, or if you haven't read it, go read it. It's just up on Webtoon. Just search Heaven's Hymn, HYMN or NM, MN. Him, yeah, him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can write it. I know what it looks like. I suck at spelling vocally. I've never made it past my first word in any spelling bee I participated in. So, yeah. So thank you guys for being here. I hope you had a good time. Hope this was informational. Anything you want to say before we wrap up, Spencer?
No, thanks so much. Go make worlds.
Yeah. Build them. And we will... we'll see you guys next week. We'll figure out what we're doing then. It'll probably be pretty casual as well because we are getting ready for FanX. So, yeah. Okay. See you guys. Hope you had fun. Hi, Shannon. Welcome to the stream. We're just finished. Okay. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.